Thank you for joining me as I present my paper, Changing the Frame, Examining the Contemporary Evolution of the Arts Council England to Inform Future Communication Practices for the Canada Council for the Arts. I have a brief agenda which will overgo my literature review all the way down to my concluding remarks, discussing findings, methodology, and theoretical anchoring. The arts in Canada have been dismissed and devalued for years as they've been under social and political attack and grossly underfunded by particular governments in power. Many don't see the arts as something present in our day-to-day lives. This is very problematic because one of the main funding sources for Canada's predominant arts organization, the Canada Council for the Arts, is federal funds, and public support and appreciation is critical to sustaining the arts in Canada. This is a similar situation in England, in the UK. We're not alone. England's Arts Council England, ACE, has similar social and economic challenges, particularly those enforced by political parties in power. In response to this, they developed a strategic communications campaign aimed at firmly establishing the importance of the arts in the English psyche, basically asking the question, what do people value about the arts? Working through this idea of demonstrating public value, they developed a strategic framework to become more involved and present and relevant to British life. Speaking of frameworks, cognitive linguist George Lakoff states that frames are the mental structures that enable humans to understand and sometimes fabricate our realities. We can reframe concepts by turning negative views or ideas into positives through introduction of new language or a new concept. The ACE's new frame has a fundamental narrative that acts to serve the public and perform a beneficial service through enhancing our lives. From that, and understanding this idea of public value, I was wondering what identifiable communication themes utilized by the Arts Council England could be relevant to repositioning the Canada Council for the Arts. Again, considering the cultural differences, which are great, what could and should be done by the CCA differently to reach Canadians? My research is looking to investigate and expose the communication theory and themes used, to discover comparable tactics used by the ACE, and to create a series of strategic suggestions for the CCA based on the ACE's example. I undertook considerable discourse analysis of 15 pieces of literature, both internally produced and externally. The theoretical paradigms that I've structured this within, due to the use of discourse analysis, are relativist and constructivist. Essentially, when you conduct discourse analysis, it is important to include the social and historical context in which, or the time frame in which the material being reviewed was produced. This was produced during the period of 2002 to 2017, during which the Arts Council England was undergoing intense scrutiny due to funding cuts and lack of a demonstration of what is commonly referred to as public value. I have a definition of public value here up on the slide. Public value is defined as the readily observable outcomes or measurable impacts on the public from the public tax dollars being put into organizations, institutions, and programs that support the arts. Through the collection of the data and analysis through the work of George Lakoff, the existence of continual frames in the discourse of the reports or literature acted to elaborate or define what is considered public value, and what is publicly valuable about the Arts Council England. To positively identify frameworks within a discourse, we need to acknowledge the deep framing structure that might be present, such as our deeply embedded ideologies or political philosophies. These are known, according to George Lakoff, as our deep frames. In order to frame this idea of public value properly or reframe it, we need to acknowledge where people are coming from with their ideas of values. From there, in order to make the shift, Lakoff posits that it is utilizing surface frames and lexical frames in order to reframe something or reposition it, so to speak, in the public psyche. Surface frames are basically conduits or bridges that bridge mental concepts or develop structures back to deep frames. They generally support new ideas or provide a conduit from what we know to better understanding something new. Something new is generally framed as a lexical frame, a specific word which will act as either a support or a symbol or a representation of an idea. And these words help us discover surface frameworks that are at play, particularly concerning public value. In reviewing the data, we learned that there were several frameworks at work. There were 6 lexical frameworks at play: accessibility, inclusion, accountability, advocacy, sustainability, and transparency in the 15 articles surveyed. These were grouped together generally because they were bridged closely in the discourse. They were formulated into 3 surface frameworks as noted here. The inclusion framework being that public value was derived from all segments of society being able to participate in art events, as well as having it be accessible to all locations throughout England, not just urban centers. The accountability framework was that public value derived through being accountable for spending financially and showing careful measurement, as well as advocating for arts groups for more funding and or their right to the funds. And the sustainability framework, which has come in the last 5 years, with the concern of public value deriving from the arts organizations remaining relevant and addressing the needs and concerns of the public which funds it, or the stakeholder. Here we see the stakeholder is identified as lotto ticket holders, donors, readers, theater patrons, concert goers, and taxpayers. Basically, the ACE acknowledges that the public funds their activities. There are some fundamental differences between the Arts Council England and the Council for the Arts. The ACE also has the museums and galleries and historical property sector under its umbrella. Therefore, it gets considerably more funding because it actually can derive a profit. Also, they derive funding from the National Lottery in conjunction from the government and private donors, which is not the case for the Canada Council for the Arts. Additionally, the Canada Council for the Arts has to make a very concentrated investment and pay close attention to addressing the concerns of 3 main groups found within Canada: the French community, the English, and Indigenous communities. These all have to be treated equally and have considerable representation in their own right. Fundamentally, the recommendations I have for the Canada Council for the Arts stem from the strategic frameworks that were noted previously, that there should be a great focus on maximum public inclusion and participation, particularly considering the vast array of audiences that Canada does have due to its cultural diversity. Being avid yet accountable advocates for the arts in Canada, fundamentally showing both financial roots and processes, but also showing outcomes and outputs of arts organizations who have received funding. Demonstrating sustainable initiatives and providing clear public communication is just something that's very important to show its intrinsic value to this society and to our culture at large. Really showing how the arts impact the day-to-day of Canadians and how we can further educate and move the society to an arts-based and arts-appreciative society. All in all, the CCA is at a turning point, and this is a real opportunity with this infusion of public funds to create a dialogue with the public in order to address their needs and concerns and this really real issue of public value. Looking to the example of Arts Council England would be a really great way, and looking at these 3 strategic frameworks and analyzing where the Arts Council Canada or the Canada Council for the Arts falls within this may lead to its continuation and potential success.